Hello everybody. Well, it's time for the inevitable planning disasters 4. Just like the inevitable terrible remake of your favourite childhood show, you knew it was coming. Right, well, for you today, I have 3 wild examples of what happens when you try to cut those corners and save those pennies. So let's get stuck in, because we're going to Newburn in Newcastle upon Tyne for the Spencer Court Calamity. Now, Newburn was once an industrial powerhouse. It bears absolutely no resemblance to this today, but once the local steelworks was so big it actually went over the top of the village. No joke, they cut right through the street and parasitically covered the place. But that's not the planning disaster we're talking about today. Maybe we can save that for another video, because today we're talking about what happened next. In the 1980s, they started to clear the land, the factory having long since gone bust, and decided what better place to build some flats on the site of a sketchy old factory which had been built haphazardly over decades of expansion. What could possibly lie underground here? Well, it turns out something quite unstoppable, because it went from looking like this to this. What the planners had not taken into account was the Newburn culvert, built back in the 1700s to cover the local stream which fed into the Tyne. It once ran a water wheel, which was part of the start of the local industry. This culvert, owned by the bastard Duke of Northumberland, had not been maintained properly in decades. Then one day, people in their new flats, going about their lives, watching TV and cooking their dinner, heard a storm coming. I like the idea at least one of these people was watching some mid-90s disaster film on TV as this played out, because the rain from that storm had to go somewhere, and into the unmaintained culvert it went. And it came out everywhere, washing away the roads, the lawns, the gardens, the cars, and the very ground these flats stood on. Amazingly, no one was killed in this catastrophe, but the flat and house owners lost everything. Once they got out, they were never allowed to go back in. While we might be talking about planning disasters, and this is one, I've got to say that the structural integrity of those flats themselves is quite something. Look at the depth of those supports, and they actually work long enough for everybody to escape. Now, demolition and a long drawn-out £20 million court case against the scumbag Duke then took place, but we'll not get into that here. Aside to say that he claimed he had to sell 80 items from his castle to pay the court fees. Oh no, not the items. If you want to know more, I put links in the description to follow up on that. But we don't have the time, because we're going to Wales. Pembrokeshire, Wales, to be exact. Back in the 60s, they decided they needed a bridge that looks like this, because this is the actual bridge. But it's not the original one, because this is the Clado bridge collapse. Before the bridge, a journey of 28 miles was required to get over the river. It would probably have been quicker to swim. The contract to build the bridge was awarded to A.E. Farr Limited in September 1968 for just $2.1 million. This is a suspiciously low amount for such a structure. That's only $17 million in today's money for a bridge over half a mile long. That's about the price of a fancy 2-bedroom London flat. For comparison, the recently built Sunderland Spire Bridge cost £120 million. So the construction of this Poundland Bridge started in 1970 to finally link Neyland with Pembroke Port. At first, all was going well, with the start of the bridge looming over the village below. But then, on the 2nd of June 1970, it went from looking like this to this. A 230-foot cantilever being used to put one of the 150-ton sections into position collapsed at the south side of the estuary. It killed 4 workmen. Construction was stopped. The cause of the collapse was the inadequacy of the design of a pier support diaphragm. It was half the thickness it should have been. However, it was considered the failure of site organisation between the parties as of more general significance, whatever that means. A £3 million out-of-court settlement for this was made between the county council and the consulting engineers. No one was punished. Construction resumed again in October 1972. The bridge was eventually opened to traffic on the 20th of March 1975. The final cost of the bridge, when built correctly, was 5 times as much as the original plans. This was, at the time of talking, the last major bridge disaster in the UK. I'm pleased to say it's still there standing tall and being a fantastic link for the local residents. Oh, and interestingly, this is the only bridge in Wales that you can bungee jump from. Legally. And now, for our final disaster of the video, we're going back up north to Scotswood in Newcastle for a truly horrific planning disaster. At about 9:30 a.m, Matthew Errington set off for work. When he arrived, he found 2 colleagues had slept in, so he persuaded the boss to let him work the coalface, a far more well-paid job. And so he began the long descent into the mines to reach the coalface. As he prepared for work, 3 blasts were set off to dislodge some coal. As he then began drilling into the coalface behind where these blasts had been made, he thought he had found a void. He sent a message to Joseph Robson, whose job it was to inspect such incidents. A small trickle of water started to come from the wall. Robson knew this was not good. He sent the boy to fetch a manager. And then he could smell methane. This was a terrible sign, as methane will extinguish all lamps and turn the mine into total darkness. And that is exactly what happened. The next thing to be heard was a scream of "Run!" which echoed through the mine, and then, as people tried to find their bearings, an enormous bang was heard, and with it, millions of gallons of water started erupting through the wall and into the mine tunnels. Now when this happens, miners do have one form of escape, and that is pit ponies, and their ability to sense fresh air in the total darkness. As soon as a miner could, he would find a pit pony, grab onto it, call his mates, and head for the exit. And for the workers that found these ponies, they were able to be guided to safety, with water rushing around their ankles. Sadly, many miners didn't, and they were forced to stumble around in the dark, trying to follow the walls to the exit, with water rapidly rising around them. And then there were the men mining in the tunnel below the water. 17 men were trapped here and drowned soon after. Some men went back into the mine to try to rescue their friends. Robson rescued 5 men. Another man, Sam Evans, didn't make it back out at all. Matthew Errington, who was only there because his friends slept in, did not survive. And neither did another 37 men and boys. Mothers, wives, and sisters begged to be let into the mine to search for their loved ones. The last body was not recovered until 10 months later. By April the 4th, a relief fund had raised around £250,000 in today's money for the stricken families. So it just sounds like a terrible accident, right? Well, we wouldn't be here if it was. Because of course, it was a planning disaster. Because what they hadn't taken into account was the nearby, closed, Paradise Pit, which had, in 1848, became unstable and flooded. Because the managers of the Montagu Pit had not paid close attention to the maps of the Paradise Pit, they had accidentally blasted their way into them. Now this, of course, caused the water in the closed Paradise Pit to flood into the Montagu Pit. Now, would you like to take a guess if anyone got punished for this disaster? Of course they didn't. A report was made making some future recommendations to stop this ever happening again. And if you know anything about the history of Britain's mining, you'll know things like this did happen again and again and again. There still stands a sculpture in Scotswood commemorating the disaster, but any sign of the mine is long gone. There was a film based on the disaster called The Stars Look Down from 1940, which can easily be found with a Google search. It's an okay film. It did make the New York Times 1000 Best Films Ever Made list, so there is that. Well, I hope you enjoyed part 4. It's rather late in the evening here, and I have to be getting to bed. Thank you as always for liking and subscribing if you have done so, and I'll see you in the next one.